Good morning, and welcome to Unity Spiritual Center of Denton. I'm licensed Unity teacher Pam Sybert, and I'll be giving the talk and leading the meditation this morning. Reverend Ellen is on a short but wonderful, we know, little vacation. Here at Unity, we honor and value Jesus' teachings of love and draw from the diverse and rich spiritual teachings of many religions. We teach positive, practical Christianity, and we believe in the transforming power of prayer to heal and to bring insight and wisdom into our lives. It is our wish that you find the truth that you seek. We were scheduled to have singer-songwriter Matt Grigsby today, and I know that he's popular with many of you, but he wasn't able to make it. So we'll just wish him well and welcome him back when he's able to come. But welcome to all of you who've joined us online this morning. If you're a visitor today, we would like to invite you to go to unitydenton.org website so you can sign up for our weekly e-newsletter that will keep you updated with all of our activities and events. I would say, by the way, that I would sing instead of Matt, but I believe there would be a rush for you to log off of this, and so I don't want you to do that. And now, though, Chaplain Dory Gear will share the inspirational thought for today.
Good morning. Today's theme is release. Getting that time of year when we're thinking about the new year and getting rid of the old and coming on with the new. Let us say the affirmation together. I take the best and leave the rest. And let's say it as all of us. We take the best and leave the rest. My experiences of this past year have brought me gifts of insight, new perspectives, many chances to grow and stretch myself. No doubt about that. And perhaps the opportunity to develop a skill that serves me in my work or brings greater enjoyment to my leisure time. Some experiences have been painful or difficult. These too have offered their gifts. I accept all that has come my way. With gratitude, I bless it all. I find the gifts and release that no longer serves my growth. Assured that God is my dependable source, I release any pain of a financial setback. In the joy of restored health, I release any memory of illness. Grateful for all modes of connection, I release any pain of loneliness. I move forward feeling lighter and cleansed and renewed for my journey forward. From Isaiah 43, verse 18, do not remember the former things or consider the things of old. And I would like to invite you to send us any prayer requests, which we pray over daily until we send it into Silent Unity, where they will pray over them for another 30 days. And also I want to invite you to come on our prayer time on Wednesdays at 6 on Zoom. So in this way, the more the people, the more light, and we need to send all that good light of healing and love to the people who are sick or are ailing in some way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dory, and we now invite you to join us as we share the Christ blessing with one another. We love you, we bless you, we behold the Christ in you. Prior to the 11 a.m. Sunday service is Coffee with Ellen, a 15-minute opportunity, except for today, to say hi and to check in, and that is from 10:30 to 10:45 on Zoom. And as Dory said, Reverend Ellen leads a prayer session on Zoom Wednesdays at 6 p.m. And all information about our activities, events, and classes are online at unity.org. At this time, please help help say and envision our center's affirmation. Unity Spiritual Center of Denton is an expanding center of the Christ light, mighty to embrace its good and radiate good to others. This morning's meditation will be after the talk entitled Energizing Our Spiritual Strength. Well, I hope you had a good Christmas. I realize it might not have been the one that you have had in the past or had planned on as we continue to struggle and contain the COVID-19 virus, but I hope that it was good. And we know that as we began to let go of this year and began to embrace the other, that looking back can be very painful for some. Some, most probably everyone we know, has had a significant loss. And we know that a lot of those people are still grieving, and we uplift them in our prayers and thoughts. But we also, and other losses, not just losing people, but losing job, losing housing, being food insecure, losing businesses. So it goes on and on. But we do realize that there are some blessings as well. As people called on their strength and courage and kindness and compassion for others. I decided to talk about strength today for two reasons. One is, what I was just saying, that looking back at the year that we've had, and the one upcoming, we will have struggles, and to have the strength to continue on in a positive way. But also, I chose strength because in Unity's Advent Christmas booklet, right now we are celebrating, after Christmas we celebrate the 12 days of Christmas, all the way up to January 6th, which is Epiphany. And if you can't remember what that is, or you never knew, or you need a refresher, Epiphany is on January 6th is because they believe that it took 12 days for the Magi, or the wise men, to travel to Bethlehem. So it was on January 6th that they met and saw the Christ child and deemed him divine. And that's been good news for us in Unity all of this time, because we believe that we are both human and divine, just as we are. So in the Unity Advent Christmas booklet today, as I said, is strength, and I'd like to read that to you to kind of set us up for thinking about strength. So Sunday, December 27th, a spiritual strength like no other is our foundation to stay the course when challenged by life and navigating new landscapes. How many times have you wept for yourself and loved ones? How many times have you felt impatient, frustrated, or alone? But yet still you are here because of the power of your innate strength, and the purity of your perseverance carried you through any difficulty. How many times have you silently witnessed someone's doubts and fears, and then gently whispered, "You are not alone. I am uplifting and strengthening you. When you fall, I will be here to hold you." So this power of strength for ourselves and each other, strength, body, mind, spirit, spiritual strength, it continues, is in each of us, inherent, and developed by our spiritual practices. It is our guide through the chaos and ultimately to the remembrance that God is everywhere present, in the dark and in the light. The scripture is from Philippians 4:13. When you feel your own doubts and fears, affirm every day, in every way, the light of strength illuminates my path, and I am strong and steadfast. I persevere in life. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So I have thought about strength for the last couple of weeks since I knew I was going to give this talk. And so I let my mind go on this developmental journey, thinking about us as we grew up. And so when we were young, we being, I guess, people my age, we usually thought, but I suspect kids still do, we thought of strength when we're small as physical strength. You know, stories and fairy tales and myths and all forms and all cultures present this view of strength. So I thought back about some of those in my childhood. For instance, there's Hercules, one of the Roman gods, famous for his strength, of course. That's the main thing with Hercules. There are many, many stories about his strength. And there are also many statues and paintings and all kinds of works of art that depict him in his physical prowess. But there's also a famous painting that shows Hercules holding up the sky for Atlas. Just to refresh your memory, Atlas was a titan who was condemned by Zeus to hold up the celestial heavens or sky for eternity. It's because the Titans lost the war to the Olympians. So for the rest of eternity, Atlas had to hold up the sky. But this painting that I'm talking about that shows Hercules holding it and Atlas right there is kind of interesting. Hercules kind of tricked Atlas. He offered to hold up the sky while he sent Atlas on another one of his labors. It's called the 12 labors that Hercules had. And then when Atlas got back, he didn't really want to pick up that task again. You know, you can imagine. But Hercules kind of tricked him again and said, well, here, just hold it for a few minutes. And then he split. We could talk about that story for an entire talk, too. But then remember in the Bible, there was Samson, who was so strong, he slayed a lion with his bare hands. But of course, we also remember that Samson fell for Delilah. And on behalf of the Philistines, Delilah eventually got him to tell her what it was that made him so strong. And you probably recall it was his hair. So the Philistines, of course, chopped off his hair and blinded him and put him in prison, and he lost his strength. And there's a lot to this story. We could metaphysically interpret the hair and all of that. But today, let us suffice it to say we initially knew about Samson because of his strength, his physical strength. Now, how many of you recognize the name Charles Atlas? Well, he was an Italian-American bodybuilder, and that was not his real name, and this is the reason that I brought up Atlas earlier. But whom we know now as Charles Atlas, was a little kid growing up in Brooklyn. He was skinny and frail, and he was bullied and beaten by the neighborhood kids all the time. But get this, it was on a museum trip where he saw statues of Hercules and Atlas that inspired him in the first place to start weightlifting. And as you know, the ads, he had a fabulous career, and the ads were like, don't be a 90-pound weakling anymore, that sort of thing. But he couldn't even afford weights in the beginning, but he started with what he had. And the kids in the neighborhood eventually started calling him Atlas. So that's why he took up that name and added the first name too. So there are many, many stories. About physical strength. I just tried to pick a few that perhaps most of you know, just a sample. Physical strength is important. Obviously, it's very important. Not that we're going to be slaying lions, I don't think, or anything like that, but we need to be strong enough to be able to carry out the work that we do and are meant to do. Then, as we continue to grow up, we learn more about mental and emotional strength. We begin to hear and read stories and begin to be taught that a lot of people just have a really strong character. It has nothing to do with physical strength. And we meet those people, and some of them are in our own families. For example, both my mother and grandmother were very strong women at a time when decidedly it was a man's world, so to speak. My grandmother's young husband was killed in a plant explosion on Easter morning, leaving her with 3 small children to rear. She had never worked outside the home. She didn't have much of a formal education. But despite that terrible tragedy, and it was a tragedy, she never let that define her life. She eventually remarried, and that was the grandfather that I knew. But she was a very, very strong, she was kind too, but she was very strong, and she lived a strong life with character. So we began to learn about strength and courage and steadfastness in a different way as we began to grow up. And mental and emotional strength is very important too. Well, what about spiritual strength? What about spiritual strength? Well, one story in the Bible that talks about spiritual strength overcoming physical strength is the one that many of you will recognize, and that's David and Goliath. Right? Goliath was a big giant and had lots of armor and weapons. And by the way, that represents matter, metaphysically speaking, and material conditions. But David, poor, frail David, only had a small slingshot for protection. That's the only protection he had. But metaphysically, he does represent spiritual strength because he used his divine intelligence and was able to uncover a weakness in Goliath. And of course, he was able to kill him with just a small slingshot. Well, our lives may not be dramatic as these, but when we're on the spiritual path, we begin to realize that spiritual strength is really in the back of both of those, mental and emotional strength and even physical strength, as we do our best not to allow ourselves to think of being weak, but instead being strong. So spiritual strength can overcome a great deal with commitment, practice, and time. In his book, The Revealing Word, our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, said that all strength, physical, mental, and spiritual, originates in spirit, and the thought and word spiritually expressed becomes the manifestation. And no doubt, if you've been around Unity for a while, you've heard that Charles Fillmore spoke and wrote about these 12 spiritual powers that we all possess. He learned it from his New Thought teacher, Emma Curtis Hopkins. So I would be remiss today if we're focusing on strength, but it's really important to understand that all 12 powers work together. We separate them to learn about them, but they are a unit. So for those of you who may have forgotten or don't know about all 12 spiritual powers, I'm just going to read them quickly. Love, imagination, power. There's even a power called power. It's more like dominion. Judgment or wisdom, understanding, zeal, elimination, faith, life, order, will, and strength. Today's topics. So they all work together. You can imagine how important it is to have faith with strength, love, imagination, all of those. And remember back in the beginning, I read the passage from the Unity Advent booklet, and it said, though spiritual strength is inherent in each of us, it is developed through our spiritual practices. And you know, this makes sense to us because think about, we all have these aptitudes, but unless we bring them forth, call on them, bring them forth, work hard in school, etc., they can just be minimal or even dormant. So just like that, we need to call on and visualize and meditate on our spiritual powers as well. Well, the disciple Andrew is the one that represents strength Charles Fillmore and some of his predecessors gave each strength a disciple and also a part of the body and even a color, but I'm not going to talk about the colors today. Well, Andrew was the brother of Peter, and Peter, of course, is faith and the number one spiritual power. But Andrew was a fisherman, as were lots of the disciples. So naturally, you can think about how physically strong he had to be. You've seen those pictures of those great big nets that they had to pull in from the sea. But as he began to follow Jesus, he had to develop another kind of strength. And in this case, the ability to choose a course and stick with it. The strength center in the body is in the small of the back. Ultimately, what we want to do, according to Charles Fillmore, is to bring this power into expression more and more through our thoughts, ideas, and action. I own quite a few books about the 12 powers. I found 8 without looking too hard. So I took a stroll through some of them with my eyes on the power of strength, and I just wanted to share a few ideas that I thought were particularly interesting and, more importantly, useful. One book is called How to Use Your 12 Gifts from God by William Walsh, and it has a couple of really good points. If I ask you in the very beginning of this talk to define strength, you would probably say, courage and endurance, those kinds of things. But Walsh says strength is stillness. When I first read it, I don't think I would have come up with that right away, or if you'd asked me to define strength. Walsh says that strength has four spiritual aspects. The divine strength has 4 spiritual aspects: patience, tolerance, steadfastness, and balance. He reminds us that just action in and of itself is not strength, because he says that strength is stillness. Specifically, he says you find your strength in the stillness and silence of your being. You find your confidence and security by being still. And then he talked about 2 ways that spiritual strength manifests in your consciousness. These were the first 2 that I thought were so important. The first is in the form of patience. Do you think of patience as being an attribute of strength? He also calls it calm endurance, that also could be known as persistent courage. I particularly like that persistent in front of courage, because sometimes when we use the word persistent, well, she was very persistent that I do this, but persistent can mean calm and steady, persistent courage. And the second way that he says physical strength can manifest itself in your consciousness is in the form of tolerance. He defines tolerance as the ability to be fair to those with whom you disagree. And also says that while it may be difficult for you to realize that someone who believes and acts differently than you is demonstrating their level of consciousness just like you are. We give ourselves that privilege, right? To behave and think as we want, but sometimes we're not as generous with others, in other words. So the main takeaway here, I believe, with the tolerance is that if and when you find yourself in conflict with someone, and it could be overt, it could be an argument or a fight, or if it's simply an inner conflict that you have in your mind about someone, it's very important to call on your inner divine strength that can lead to spiritual tolerance. So I particularly liked those. Patience and tolerance being manifestations of strength. Because when we acknowledge our humanity, that's pretty easy for most of us, but claim our divine nature, our highest self, our divine powers, and in this case, our divine power of strength. There's a verse from Isaiah 30:15, "In quietness and confidence shall be your strength." I listened to a wonderful episode of my favorite podcast this week, or I guess it was last week, On Being with Krista Tippett. She had two guests, very, very different. One was the Episcopal Bishop Michael Curry. By the way, if you happen to watch the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle on television, he was the African-American bishop who spoke so passionately at that wedding. And her other guest was Dr. Russell Moore of the Southern Baptist Association, or Convention, I should say, the Southern Baptist Convention. Well, what was fascinating to me is despite being very different in their theoretical points of view, they have become friends, and they do some work together because they agree on some things and work together. I think it's a very good example for all of us. But when addressing the questions about the state of our nation, the apparent division, adversity, lack of civility, the Baptist minister said that he didn't like the word civility. And first I was a little startled, and I thought, what? He's against civility? But of course what he said was that he accepted that word and he understood what it's supposed to mean, but he thought it was too low of a standard. That really gave me pause for thought, because civility usually means just being polite. But he said that wasn't good enough, and that fascinated me. And I thought, well, if we really are going to get along together, walking this planet together, exhibiting patience and tolerance of one another, then it is too low of a standard. We do need more commitment. And while he didn't talk about strength specifically, I thought it fit in so well with strength and love and all of our spiritual powers. But even more powerful to me in that podcast, the Episcopal bishop used the Good Samaritan story as a talking point. And I know most of you know this parable. Just very briefly, it was a parable that was told by Jesus. What you might not recall is why he told that parable. Well, he was asked by a man that said, "I know you taught us the 2 commandments, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and love your neighbor as yourself, but who is my neighbor?" And Jesus told the parable about the man who was traveling that was attacked by thieves, robbed and beaten and left on the side of the road to die. A priest came by, saw it, kept walking. A Levite, who are people that assisted the priest, saw but kept walking. And another man, who was a Samaritan, sworn enemies of the 2 Jews that just had walked by, stopped, cared for the man, put him on his donkey, took him to a nearby inn where he continued through the night to treat this man. And the next day gave the innkeeper money so that the man could continue to stay there and heal and eat, etc. And even said, the next time I come through, if this is not enough money, I will give you more. So Jesus asked the man, after telling him the parable, now who was the neighbor in this story? Of course, the man answers, the Samaritan, and Jesus told him to remember the story and behave like the Samaritan. So, the Bishop, Curry, proposed that for illustration purposes, we could interchange some of those characters to present the reality of our binary talk today. I think you know what I mean. It's binary. It's red states, it's blue states, it's conservative, it's liberal, it's Republicans, it's Democrats. Very little, if any at all, gray area. So he said in that story, we could revise it and say it was the Republicans that walked by without helping, and a Democrat stopped to help. Or we could say that it was the Democrats that walked by, and a Republican stopped to help the man. He said the question was, who do you neighbor? Who would you neighbor? I'll be honest, normally I don't like using nouns as verbs most of the time. but I really like this. Who would you neighbor? Ask yourself the question, who are you in that story? Who are you in that story? We all like to think the best of ourselves, but are you too busy and too important to stop, or somebody else might do it, or whatever that is? It comes down to, what kind of person are you? The question to me, really, is what kind of person do you want to be? Because I believe we can change at any moment. Do you only want to consider helping those who are just like you? What is your choice? For it is a choice. Anyway, that podcast is wonderful, and I recommend listening to the whole thing, On Being with Krista Tippett. Another definition, briefly, that we talked about was the one that we would readily come up with, and that's to stay the course, to choose something and be strong, be unwavering in the direction that we know is right. How do we know it's right? Well, a good theological response to that is because it is coming from our highest nature, from our Christ consciousness. It's coming to us in the silence and stillness and in our perfection. In the book Power Up, the 12 Powers Revisited as Accelerated Abilities by Paul Hesselbeck and Cher Holton, it is pointed out that, sometimes we make choices, but we need help sticking to those choices. Maybe we don't believe in the cause as much as we thought we did, or maybe we don't believe in ourselves enough to stick with it. And that can be called an underdeveloped sense of strength. And so they remind us how important it is with combining faith with strength in making our choices. Because we know, right, it's a lot easier to stick with something when we feel strongly about it, right? But they point out that it's also possible to have an overdeveloped. That was the underdeveloped. We need help going forward. It's also possible to have an overdeveloped power of strength. And by that one, I think we can all recognize it's being stubborn, bull-headed, regardless of the facts and what anyone else says, perhaps pretty overt about all of that. Opposite of stillness, I would say. So physical, mental, and spiritual strength are all three important. To be strong physically is important. To be strong mentally is important. And to be strong spiritually is important. To come from the highest consciousness possible and stay the course and be the best that you can be. As we renew our commitments for the upcoming new year, let us revitalize and re-energize our spiritual practices of the silence and the stillness, and calling on our spiritual powers, including the inner divine strength, power of strength, the inner divine power of strength. So let us practice some silence right now as we prepare for meditation. If you can, put your feet on the floor. I'll do this one with you. Put your shoulders up for just a second and then roll them back, not in an exaggerated way, just roll them back and then drop them down into the shoulder socket. I realize myself that I find myself kind of going forward there. Put your hands in your lap if you'd like, with your palms up, but if it's more comfortable for you to put them beside you, do that too. Do what is comfortable for you right now. And let us start with 3 deep breaths. Close your eyes if you'd like, if you haven't already, or at least avert your glance. I was going to just give a meditation on strength thought for a couple of weeks, and then I realized how important it is for the new year for us to incorporate all 12 powers. So I decided on a 12-power meditation. With your attention at the top of your head, silently affirm, I am faith. I have faith in things invisible. With spiritual guidance, I know the truth of what I am. I am spirit, and I am committed to being the best Christ I can be. With your attention over your left eye, silently affirm, I am will. I align my consciousness with divine mind. I am open and receptive to following my understanding of God mind. I make choices based on this good. With your attention over your right eye, silently affirm, I am understanding. I give thanks for spiritually seeing, comprehending, and knowing the truth. And the truth sets me free. Now focus your attention to the center of your forehead and silently affirm, I am imagination. I see from the highest watch. I envision peace and harmony in this abundant universe. My divinely inspired imagination catapults my creativity and wonder. And now focus on the back of your neck, the base of your brain, and silently affirm, I am zeal. I go forward with vigor and enthusiasm for that which is mine to do. I am passionate about my life. Now focus on the hollow of your throat and silently claim, I am power. I allow no thoughts of limitation, for I have dominion over my thoughts. I have the power to pivot my thoughts as necessary, to energize my body, and to bless others. I think thoughts of wholeness for all. Let your thoughts drop now to your heart center and silently affirm, I am love. I'm the perfect expression of divine love. Love that transforms, transfigures, and fills my heart with harmony. Love fills my mind with kind, helpful thoughts. Through the consciousness of love, words of praise and cheer emerge from my lips. Now, just beneath the heart, the solar plexus, silently affirm, I am wisdom and good judgment. I temper my emotions with wisdom and make the best decisions for myself and my well-being. This allows me to bless and support others. And now at the navel, the center of the abdomen, affirm, I am order. I use right sequencing and harmony to claim order in my world. The order that allows my spirit to be nurtured and calm. Divine order is established in my mind and body. And now the spine, from the base of the brain to the tip of the spine. Affirm, I am strength. My strength is steady, quiet, and confident because my strength emanates from my awareness of my Christ consciousness. And now focus on the lower back and affirm, I am elimination. I release all of the works against my higher good. I release resentment, petty concerns, and negative behaviors. For in my consciousness, all is well. And finally, focus on the lower part of the abdomen and silently affirm, I am life. Radiant light and life flow through me, recharging my body, mind, and spirit. With new energy and strength, I fully embrace oneness and wholeness. And returning to this time and place, you may want to stretch and move around a little bit. Open your eyes when you are ready. And so it is. Thank you. Well, instead of music, you get more me. It is time for our offertory. I have a virtual offering bag here. I'll just hold it in front of my face. That would be good for a wrist. It's just a symbol. You may give online at unitydenton.org or send in your contribution by mail. And we thank you very much in advance for your generous offerings. Let us say together our offertory blessing. Divine love, through me, blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, Father, Mother, God. As Dory mentioned, you may send us a prayer request online. You may send your prayer request by mail. You may email the minister or a particular chaplain or all the chaplains. We thank you so much for being here today. Now let's close with the prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Thank you for joining us. I wish you a new year filled with joy and resilience. Blessings. Thanks.